Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of True Believers here on the Fandom Podcast Network. This is our show covering everything that is happening within the MCU. And right now, of course, the big talk is Secret Invasion. Now, went through some scroll testing last week. Everybody's DNA seemed okay. So I'm going to welcome back, hoping he hasn't changed his DNA yet again, my co-host for True Believers, the one, the only, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
Just don't cut off a finger to prove it. Okay, that's all
No,
I ask.
I do have a serum here next to me for injections, but no finger cutting.
Yeah, that's one that goes in the butt, right?
Yeah. No, so we are going into episode 2 of Secret Invasion, entitled Promises. Kevin, real quick though I want to talk about this because it's been an interesting reaction to Secret Invasion, as far as people kind of not sure what to do with it yet. Have you gotten that general impression from social media?
Yeah, and I can understand where that's coming from, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But what I want to know is there was an article about how people are saying this is the lowest rated Disney Plus series, and how do we know that?
Well,
Because Disney Plus doesn't release that information, as far as I know, unless they really want to release like a blockbuster bang out of the door hit, then they'll mention it. But I don't get that.
I thought I saw it was the second lowest, but I could be mistaken. I think Kevin we can say writer strike. I think in this case they're putting out these numbers as kind of a leverage ploy.
No, that makes no sense. First of all, this has been done before the writer's strike. So I don't understand how this is leveraged. This is why would a company who has to employ writers release any information? This is the lowest. Who else knows that this was the lowest rated series that's come out, or MCU series that's come out? I don't understand how that's a leverage. If anything, it goes against to what they would be trying to do, meaning that if this information is released by Disney, they don't want to say, "Oh, this is our lowest rated show." I think writers.
No, I think what they're saying is, because one of the big arguments in the writer strike right now is that because the numbers are so high on streaming, they're not getting their cut, so on and so forth. I think by Disney releasing these numbers showing that, hey, the streaming boom has stopped and the numbers are shrinking, you can't be asking for this much more money from it.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I don't know if I believe where that's coming from, and I don't know. It just seems too convoluted. I don't think it's that cut and dry.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is just convoluted at this point. So it's hard to say, and even if numbers do come out, it's hard to say if they're even accurate.
It could just be. I would be more. I would believe like MCU fatigue. That I would believe. Because that's a thing. So
yeah, that is most definitely a thing right now. I think there's a lot. I think there's just a general fandom fatigue going on right now. But I think we can get into that on another show. But we do need to talk about Secret Invasion Episode 2 Promises. And before we get started, major Skrull-filled spoilers ahead. We're going to dive deep into the latest episode of Secret Invasion. So if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. Come back, rejoin us, whether it's on YouTube or on the podcast version of this show. But with that, Mr. Reitzel, would you care to give us the plot synopsis for Secret Invasion Episode 2?
Of course. In 1997, Fury meets a young Gravik and consoles him while giving a speech to the Skrull immigrants, promising to find him a new home in the present day. After escaping from the bombing attack, Fury learns from Talos that there are 1 million Skrulls living on Earth amongst humans. An angered Fury parts way with Talos, and later meeting with Hill's mother Elizabeth to explain the circumstances of her death. As the United States is implicated in the bombing attack, Gravik meets with members of the Skrull Council who express disapproval of his actions. Gravik reminds the council of Fury's failure to deliver on his promise and appoints himself the new Skrull general with a majority in favor. Council member Shirley Sager, who refuses to submit, secretly contacts Talos, who asks her to set up a meeting between him and Gravik. In London, Fury meets with Colonel James Rhodes and explains to him the Skrull threat. To Fury's dismay, Rhodes gives him a military discharge due to his presence at the bombing attack, which escalated the tension between the United States and other international governments. Falsworth arrives at the butcher shop where one of the Skrulls, Brogan, is imprisoned and interrogates him. She learns that Gravik is building a machine for the purpose of strengthening the skulls, and a scientist couple named Dalton is involved. Gaia secretly discovers that the Skrulls are experimenting on various alien samples. Afterwards, she accompanies Gravik on a mission to rescue Brogan. Suspecting him of having talked, Gravik has Brogan executed. Later, Fury returns to his home where he is greeted by his wife Priscilla, who is also a Skrull.
So a lot to take in this episode. Obviously, the Skrulls have a much bigger foothold than anybody realized. Secretly sneaking a million Skrulls onto the planet. I got to think that happened during the blip, Kevin.
Probably, yeah.
So with that, let's get some first reactions. I know you just watched this episode the other night. What were your first reactions coming out of episode 2?
I was starting to regret the MCU's decision to kill off Maria. The way that it was done, and specifically the moment between Fury and her mom, Elizabeth, where she's watching her daughter's body being put in the military plane and stuff like that. And she, has questions about her death, and Fury's right there to basically tell her what happened. Which I thought was a good scene, but I still question: did you really have to kill her? I at least give her more burn during the show before you do something like that. I guess I would have loved to have seen her get a little more action. I'm not that decision hasn't sat with me, because when it did happen in the first episode, I always thought that maybe there was a chance she's not dead, or maybe there's going to be something more evolved around it that made it more meaningful, I guess. And it wasn't, I guess. That was part of it. I thought this episode, I was hoping this episode would kind of get more, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it didn't grab me as much as I was hoping as I would, Kyle. I don't know what it was. Obviously now there's tension between Talos and Fury. Now, I knew we get the thing at the end where he's now married to a woman who is a Skrull. And I knew there had to be something that Fury had to be invested in this partnership with a Skrull. There had to be someone, and my hunches were right on that he had someone that he was in love with. And I think that you have to have Fury be attached to someone that is part of this secret Skrull invasion, I guess, so to speak, that makes him, not just an ally, but someone who's now really, really involved. And I like the flashbacks that we got, especially some of the flashbacks to Captain Marvel, and then we get the flashbacks to him, meeting with the Skrulls and promising this and that. But I don't know. I just felt that there was something kind of missing here. I don't know if it's because all the Skrull action seems to be taking place outside of the United States and not in the United States, at least yet. There's just something that's just disjointed, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Am I alone in this, Kyle?
I can see where you're coming from, and I think it might be for a couple of reasons. I saw this episode when I was initially done with it. This felt like this was the fully setting the table. We kind of had like maybe putting the dishes on the table in the first episode, and this episode now has put the pieces of the meal and everything on the table. But there wasn't a lot of action in this episode, and I think too that we still have a lot of characters we have some questions on that we haven't got answered yet, that we're building towards. I really think this was to really show the stakes of what was going on with the reveal of a million Skrulls are now on the planet in that great scene between Fury and Talos on the train. And I also think too that there's some interesting developments. I'm still not quite sure Maria Hill's dead. If you go back to Winter Soldier, Nick Fury took that one thing that stopped his heartbeat to like 1 beat a minute for a period of time. I think, or maybe it's a Skrull that was impersonating Maria Hill. There's a possibility because everything I keep seeing is that Maria Hill does have a role in the upcoming Marvels movie. So I don't know if it's a flashback or what's going on there.
And then they're introducing her as a special guest star at the end of this episode, and she wasn't even in it. You know, all you see is a coffin, and then did you even see her in a flashback to the previous episode?
I think right in the opening showing what previously happened in the previous.
So I don't know. I hope that she comes back. I don't care if it's cheesy or not. I wasn't ready to see that happen, you know.
But I think this episode set up a lot and really put the chess pieces in place. And like you said, I agree with the revelation at the end of the episode that Fury is married, and it's a Skrull. I think that really does set up motivation for Fury going forward. And I think there's some other things that happen in this episode, which we'll get into in a little bit, that really kind of change the dynamic for Fury has been changed greatly after this episode. And I think we have to look at it in a different light. But I think this episode was very much a setup episode for what is coming. And that's maybe why it feels a little off, because it's so early in the season.
You know what was bugging me too is Fury's beard. It just doesn't look right.
Yeah,
I don't like the look of it. You think someone like Fury would have a much more kind of like cut goatee looking weird. It looks either too fake or something. It just was bugging me the whole episode.
I still think this is kind of like the fact that Fury is kind of in this disheveled state and he's still coping with things. And I think we'll get back to a classic Fury before it's all said and done.
I hope so. I'm not liking this weird floofy beard thing he's got going on. It's bugging me
with the episode. But let me ask you this: was there anybody in the cast this week that stood out for you, Kevin?
It was nice to see Don Cheadle, Rhodey, get some burn in this. There's a trope where when someone gets higher in a position, they start to become more like, especially in a political position, because you can go from military to political just like that, you know, that they start to kind of get on the other side of the fence and they're not as cool, you know, they're not as fun. They're not as like, I got your back type of situation. And I didn't like how, you know, his character was feeling the pressure of the political side and not saying, you know, look, I got to do this, but deep down, I got your back. I didn't get that feeling. That bugged me too. That rubbed me the wrong way as well. This is Rhodey, you know, he should remember what, you know, he and Tony went through, you know, and I felt like they shouldn't have left on that, you know, the way it was left. You know what I mean?
I see what you mean. And that was a phenomenal scene. We're going to talk about that particular scene in a little bit. With Rhodey, I think it's a combination of a couple of things, because they've always played up his kind of conflict between the government and his government duties and his duties and what he does as a hero as well. And there's always been a little bit of that conflict within Rhodey, whether it's going back even to the first Iron Man. So I think there's always been that at play. And so I think there's some of that. And I've said this before, I'm still not convinced that this is the Rhodey we know and love. And I want to see how that's going to play out. But there were signs of it. Like when he's sitting in front of the tribunal after the events that happened and they're questioning him, and he talks about how he just wants to go get the suit and carpet bomb the whole place.
Right.
He's so fed up with it. So there's a bit of that there, but he, without a doubt, Don Cheadle was phenomenal in this episode.
The other character I want to touch on is Olivia Colman as Sonia Fallsworth. And you had mentioned in the last episode, and for the fans, that Farnsworth is the name that is attached to the Captain Britain character. Is this right?
Union Jack. The
Union Jack, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm thinking they should be good guys, right?
Well, you would think, but we are talking about spies at this point.
Yeah. Well, she was very entertaining in this episode. She was badass, but she doesn't seem like someone that would support a Union Jack type of, you know, character or be part of that family. I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you, I was getting kind of a oh crap, what's her name? A Professor Umbridge vibe from Harry Potter. You remember Professor Umbridge, Kyle?
Yeah, I've seen that, and a few people threw that meme out on
Yeah,
social media as
and
well.
that's not a good thing if we're expecting her to be on Fury's side here, especially their first meeting, which didn't go too well. So if she's part of this Union Jack thing, Kyle, she better turn things around.
Well, so I'm glad you brought this up because a little bit of information came my way that I had forgotten about. I talked about this on our Culture Clash summer entertainment catch up we just did. I watched that Marvel MCU series Icons. Well, one of the actors who was in that they went to often when they were talking about the Captain America film was the actor who played Lord Falsworth in Captain America, and I forgot they included that character as part of the Howling Commandos in that movie.
He
So
was
there
a
is
Howling Commando.
the Howling Commandos, the Captain America's
No, I know
bunch
who
that
they are. Are you saying a Fallsworth was one of the
yeah,
Howling Commandos?
Falsworth was one of the Howling Commandos.
Okay, okay.
So that establishes that family even more into the MCU than just with Olivia Colman's character.
On a side note, I just got a copy of Captain America: First Avenger in 3D. So
Very nice.
adding to my 3D collection.
Deck for the Shield, Kevin.
Yeah, that one got me each time, even though it was coming. That was a cool 3D effect.
But I think what's going on here, Kevin, and this is what we have to look at. I don't necessarily think that there's good guys or bad guys completely here. I think there's shades because we're dealing with spies and they're each doing their thing their own way to get the results they want. It's shades of gray. I don't necessarily think she's a bad guy per se, but I think she's also has no qualms about doing what she needs to do to get the mission done.
So back to the show in a whole here. So what I like is that we're getting almost full hour episodes. Of course, that includes all the long extra credits and stuff, but still, it's almost an hour. But I don't know if they're using the hour wisely. Is my point. I think there needs to be just something to grab you a little bit more, and you know, I think some allies need to step up sooner for Fury here, because I don't know. It's weird for me to also think that Fury is the only Avenger. I'm going to call him Avenger because he's with the Avengers. He organized the Avengers that is able to step in here and help. And it is weird to think that no one else of the former Avengers or possible new Avengers has stepped in to help here. This is what I'm worried about with the show.
And actually, they as far as the Avengers aspect, they actually addressed that in this episode. There's in that conversation between Talos and Fury on the train. He talks about bringing in his friends, and he's like, "Yeah, and do we really want one of them getting captured and being replaced right now with the circumstances the way they are?"
So spell that out for us, Kyle.
They don't want a Skrull getting their hands on a superpowered person and replacing them within the Avengers to have all this clearance and maybe knowing what they know about how the Skrulls adapt people, getting their memories and finding out about the rest of the Avengers per se and things of that nature. And also, you got to remember the Avengers are at this point in the MCU are a little bit of a scattered mess right now. If they even really are together, you have. It's not no Steve Rogers, no Thor, no Iron Man at this point. So I don't know if there's even per se a Avengers team at the moment.
Yeah, I think with enough of the what have we been watching all this last year and a half or 2 years of Disney Plus programming? Why can't someone step up and help? Where's She-Hulk? Where's the new Hawkeye? This is where you need to pop these people into situations like this to start realizing, okay, this is the other team. I don't know. I just him being the lone rogue in all of this, to me, I'm not buying it yet. He needs some help.
Well, we'll see what happens. This is only the second episode. Let's see what they establish here. But Kevin, we're not the only ones who had some thoughts on this episode either, because our good friend Kristen Howard from Denim Geek is doing her weekly reviews, and I've taken
Kristen.
I've taken a little bit of excerpt from her article this week, kind kind of giving her overall thoughts on the episode. So Kristen has to say, overall, Promises was a slight step up from the premiere of Secret Invasion. Much of the show's themes work better in the context of the past and the looming threat of the future. But as we're still languishing a little in the series' slow burn approach, it feels like the episode coasted along somewhat. I appreciate the intimate scenes between Nick and Talos and Nick and Rhodey, but Nick is currently a narrative pawn fitting between bits of exposition-y MCU plot. And if he's often been here on Earth with his Skrull life and we're not festering on Saber for as long as we thought, what are we supposed to make of his ignorance? It's difficult to gauge how the jaded and complex relationship between Skrull and man can be salvaged or what other twists might be in store, as Marvel tends to make the 3rd and 5th episodes of these series the ones with the biggest revelations. The only prediction I currently have is that Rhodey and or the new president of the United States will be revealed as a Skrull. Rhodey just didn't seem like himself as he and Nick's tense meeting. I think she has a good point there, and I think that's one of the things with this show, Kevin, at least with the first 2 episodes, is there has been this slow burn going on with this, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're maybe feeling a little off on this. Maybe you've been waiting for it to pick up the pace a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm just getting a little weary of, are they a Skrull? Are they a Skrull? Are they a Skrull? I bet they're a Skrull. And then it makes the reveal not as a big payoff. You know what I mean? You know, it should be harder for them to get into these positions, like the point you made earlier about, not exposing them to Avengers maybe, but getting someone into a trusted situation like that is going to be interesting to see where they go from this. But I'm kind of getting into that, are they a Skrull burnout phase? You know what I mean?
I'm not there yet because I think there's still a lot of information we're getting with that. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. If they keep playing up this throughout the entire run, I'm going to have a problem with it. If we get through next week's episode and we've kind of got all the players revealed, then I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. But we'll see. I think next week's episode is going to be a big key episode for this series.
What needs to happen is he needs a team. I don't want to see lone rogue old man Fury try to do this alone. He needs a team. He needs some help here. And whether it's Talos or Gaia turning around in some more familiar faces, it's looking very bleak right now. And maybe that's by purpose and by design, and it probably is. But it's just a little convoluted of who's who and what's happening and who, the girl that did not agree to the council, I was expecting her to get offed right away, and that's probably going to happen, after she talks to Talos, Yeah,
I think by the end of next week's episode, we're going to see a little bit more of a coming together per se. Per se. I think one of the other things that we haven't talked about yet too is the aspect of the relationship between Talos and his daughter, which I think is going to be a big part of the next episode as well, because I think
because she's starting to see the layers,
Yeah.
So yeah.
But with that, guys, we're going to take a quick break and tell you what else is going on around the Fandom Podcast Network. And when we get back into phase 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the deeper plot points and possible connections to the Marvel Comics of Secret Invasion.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And welcome back to the True Believers podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Hopefully we're making some podcasts to feed your ears. But Kevin, I want to move things around here a little bit. We're going to dive into phase 3 right now because there's some plot points, and normally we have a trivia section, but the trivia really ties into the plot points this week. So I'm going to do a little cosmic cubing and combine the two. But Kevin, our first big topic is the big revelation of this episode, in my opinion, and that is Nick Fury is married, and not only is he is married to a Skrull. This is actually a big game changer for the character of Fury because, like you said earlier when we were talking, it gives him something to be invested in with the relationship between humans and Skrulls.
Yes, and when the way that he greeted Talos in the first episode by touching his head and all that kind of stuff, you knew that there was something more there, that he's just not a liaison, that he got invested with these people and formed a special bond between him and Talos, and that this obviously led to this woman who is a Skrull. And you brought up something before we started recording that I think that we should mention, that from another podcast you mentioned that they were questioning whether or not he knows that she's a Skrull, because you see her chopping up some food there as a Skrull, and when he approaches, she changes into the other character. And then she says, "You forgot something," and then he pulls out the wedding ring and puts it on and stuff like that. So, but I think he knows. We'll find out for sure when in the next episode, I'm sure. So,
like I said, I think this changes the Fury's character's perspective greatly. And the other thing I wonder is how many people actually know he has he's married and has a wife, because obviously he doesn't wear the wedding ring as a reveal that he has a vulnerability. If something should happen to him, he gets captured. Somebody sees a wedding ring on, in the spy world, that would be a big red flag.
right.
But I'm curious if Talos would know, or if this is something that's pretty much on the down low, and that's why she keeps the human form going whenever there's other humans around, even Fury himself. But I also think there is a slight possibility maybe he did get married to a human woman, and that the Skrulls in the time he was out on the blip or something did replace her. And so, but
I'm not buying that yet, because I think that he got invested in with living and having friends as Skrulls, and I think that, just my take, I think that he fell in love with one.
And I think that's probably the case, and I think it would be a really bad look for Fury if he was married and didn't realize he was married to a Skrull, since he's supposed to be Mr. Super Spy.
Think of the advantage of being human and marrying a Skrull, and then she goes up to you in Skrull form and goes, "What human do you want me to look like?"
Yeah, exactly.
If I don't know what Fury's type is, but I'm going I don't know, Diana Ross, maybe. Give me one of the Shirelles, the one on the left. I don't know.
But I think this also ties in a little bit, reflecting his relationship with Talos, because Talos, who he thought he had this completely trustworthy relationship with, definitely kept some secrets from him, Kevin, because there's a million Skrulls walking around on Earth.
Yeah.
Pretty significant deal, when Fury was apparently only thinking was maybe a few thousand at best.
Yeah, well, he was gone for 5 years, and they didn't know if he was coming back. So that puts that changes things. And I think that, the reaction that Fury had should have been a little more understandable. So I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. But I just want to give a shout out to the woman that plays Priscilla, the Skrull wife, is Charlene Woodard.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to her character in this episode, and Charlene is a very good actress in her own right. So this is gonna be fun, and I'm curious to see what this is going to do and how it's going to change the Fury character and how we look at the Fury character too, because we've always seen him as this loner super spy. Even when he's part of the Avengers, he's still kind of on the outside, manipulating things to his own advantage. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But one of the other big aspects of this episode, Kevin, and I think this is where we got a lot. I think this is where the episode was really putting a lot of the chess pieces in place. We kind of are starting to get the reveal of what Gravik's master plan is and how deep the penetration of Skrull interfuge and sabotage has come in, because we see Gravik has gotten Skrulls into pretty important world leadership places, and then he just walks in on the council and basically becomes the general and is ready to take the Skrulls to war to take over the planet. Plus, it looks like he's got a little bit of mad scientist work going on, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I'm really intrigued by Gravik as a villain, because this is somebody who, as we're introduced at the beginning of this episode, Kevin, we see kind of how we learn more about his upbringing and what he's been through. And this is somebody who's been through some pretty heavy stuff, and it's reflective, and I think, in how he carries himself and is very businesslike so far with how he's handling things. You don't see a lot of emotion from Gravik.
Yeah, he's definitely but he's bloodthirsty though. That's what bothers me. And you got to be worried about people that, force themselves into an elected position and take over. But I think the thing that we should be really, really scared about with Gravik's intentions is finding a way to make Shooter McGavin a Skrull.
There we go.
Christopher McDonald, man. He's one of the officials that is a Skrull. And of course, if you guys know from Happy Gilmore, he was also Shooter McGavin.
They explain so much about Happy Gilmore. One of the other things too with Gravik is not only is he playing this just like you said, a little bit bloodthirsty, but the people who follow, it's a cult following of the Skrulls that are following him. I mean, it's almost blind devotion.
Yeah,
where they have, and that's what makes him so, in my opinion, so scary as a villain in this show, is that this is a guy who has blind followers and is completely dedicated to his cause.
Yeah, it's a full-on cult situation. Yeah.
So, yeah, but like I said, I think the big thing for me too was in this episode was seeing the reveal of his plan, and I think that was kind of one of the biggest things I pulled out from this episode, is that, okay, the situation is much more serious than anybody truly realized.
Yeah.
But the next thing I want to talk about, Kevin, is this guy, because we talked about it a little bit earlier, where we're not quite you weren't real happy with.
Mention his name for the audio podcast.
Yeah, Don Cheadle is Jim Rhodes. I think this is one of the scene between him and Fury, and that conversation might be one of the best scenes in MCU recent history. That was incredibly powerful. It was emotional. And it dealt with a lot of other things going on in our society than just these two guys having an argument about an alien invasion.
Yeah, this is. I don't know if I would go as far as one of the most powerful scenes in the MCU. I would say the one on the train between Talos and Fury was more interesting. Because those guys were friends, and have been friends, and that didn't end well, just like this one here. But it just, Rhodes is starting to become the politician, and that bugs me when that happens. So I'm kind of curious to see where that goes, because Rhodes, a guy in the suit, he's the one behind the mask. He's an adventurer, and I don't know, I don't know where, especially when he gets his security detail to start pushing Fury out of the room, and Fury turns a table and disarms him. I mean, come on, really? You do that to your friend? You force your security detail to get him up out of his table. Something's not right there.
Well, and I think some of it might be on the Fury side is, okay, who do I really trust right now? Who can I trust? And I mean, Rhodey basically fires Fury, and I have a theory on that, Kevin. I want to, but it also gave Sam Jackson the delivery one of my favorite lines of this series. I'm Nick Fury. Even when I'm out, I'm in. But I have a feeling, Kevin, when we were talking about this, what if Rhodey fired Fury in a way to maybe free Fury up, so he's not tied to any country or his actions don't reflect upon any country? That gives him a chance to really just go all out without necessarily ramifications from the U.S. or what he does reflects upon the United States, because they say, hey, we fired him, we cut ties with him, we have nothing to do with him. Maybe there's a little bit of that undercurrent in there, and again, the political and spy games that are being played.
Yeah, I don't know where to go with that. That interaction just didn't sit well with me. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Well, and again, even what Christian Howard said, could Rhodey be a Skrull? That's a possibility. But
we were saying that after the first episode, because now we're at, like I said, we're at that point where like everyone can be a Skrull, and it can just fall into convenient writing, and that's what I'm worried about.
And I get where you're coming from with that. I think if it's Rhodey, there's a lot of extra twists they can add into that, knowing what other things Marvel has planned. But again, this is where we're getting into the aspect of we're only in episode 2. We need to see how some things are going to play out before we can be able to give a full idea and full judgment. But Kevin, I also want to talk about this badass lady right here, because for some people, from what I've seen on social media and read about, she was the highlight of the episode for a lot of people. They really liked what she did in the episode, and just how she's coming from a totally different angle than anybody else, but she just has no qualms about what she's doing.
Okay, before we talk about that, the people that she walks in on that are interrogating that, as we find out, a Skrull, who are those people? Who is that? Are they mobsters that she's aligned with? Are those her people? This is what I'm trying to figure out.
It felt like they were maybe some kind of Russian government agents that had captured this guy, and because she walks in and on the phone, and she hands the phone over to the guy who was kind of their leader, and then whoever was on the other end of the phone, they just all back off. So I kind of felt like that maybe they were Russian government.
I don't know if I want to use the term. I don't know if they want to use the term badass. I'm just going to use the term like, we need to fear her right now.
Yeah, she's scary.
That's why and the fact that she's scary, it makes it. I'm having this internal battle of like, and she's supposed to represent someone that may be aligned with Captain Britain.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're never going to introduce that character, so it doesn't matter. And that's just kind of they're just using that name as kind of a fun what if situation. But I'm just like, she knows her way around. But I'm going to tell you one thing that that she did that kind of bugs me. It's mostly women that have the phones that have the little flip over thing. And then they have like maybe some credit cards in the little pockets or something like that. It bugs me when I'm handed someone's phone that has a little flip over thing and I'm supposed to talk into it. So I thought it was kind of funny that the gangster guy was like having to do that. Cause I don't know. It's just one of those things where like, oh, can you take our picture? And you got to deal with that flappy thing over that's supposed to close over the phone and take their picture. And then sometimes it gets in the way. Just something that bugs me.
I kind of want to know what the serum she has is too, because that looked painful for that Skrull.
Yeah.
That was
right in the butt too.
and just a shout out to Olivia Colman, because this woman the range she has as an actress is absolutely phenomenal.
I should be clear. I can't wait to see her again. Even though she scares the crap out of me, I can't wait to see her again.
No, she is a highlight for me in this as well. But Kevin, the reason why I didn't get into trivia is because I want to focus on this computer screen we're seeing right here, because a lot of the trivia from the episode is based off of what is happening with this computer screen, Kevin. Of course, the computer screen that Gaia is looking at before she's interrupted.
Do we know
The
why she's looking at this computer screen? I mean, this looks like it's something out of like 1995. This computer
Well,
screen,
they are.
this computer.
I think because they're in like Chernobyl, Russia, and there's probably not a lot of modern technology there, and they're hiding out. So they're basically whatever they can get their hands on and what's available to them.
Does that mean they have access to Chernobyl, that power drink?
That could be. That could be the source of their shape changing powers. You know, that's how they grow. They use that to water their special Skrull plants that they eat.
Back to the screenshot you're sharing here on YouTube. They're basically showing some Easter eggs of some other characters that have been introduced in the MCU, and of course have ties to the comics as well. So feel free to elaborate on that.
Well, okay, so the first person we have on this screen is a picture of at least part of Groot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to put all these puzzle pieces together. The next thing we see on the screen is the Frost Beast. Now, the last time we saw a Frost Beast, one was stranded on Earth at the end of Thor: The Dark World, and it was kind of hiding out and chasing.
Remind me about that, because I remember the Frost Beast in that movie, but I don't remember the one hiding out on Earth.
So, if you remember when they opened the portal, when the Dark Elves open the portal, a couple of Frost Beasts come through. One gets killed, but another one eats one of the Dark Elves right as it's about to kill Darcy. And then the stinger in Thor: The Dark World is that this Frost Beast was living in like some warehouse type compound with big buildings, and he was chasing around like birds and stuff like that. And that was
Oh, you mean the one that looked like a gigantic bull or something like that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I remember now. All right, I was thinking more of a humanoid-looking character, but yeah, I got you. Okay.
No, this was definitely just a big creature. So, and then the last thing we see is the hand of Cole Obsidian. Now, for those of you who might not be good with names, Cole Obsidian was one of the children of Thanos in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, and he's the one when the children of Thanos first go to Earth, they confront Doctor Strange, Tony Stark, Wong, and Bruce Banner. And in that battle, Cole Obsidian loses his hand. It gets cut off.
That's right. The big beast-looking guy.
Yeah. And it gets cut off in a Doctor Strange portal. Well, obviously, it looks like, from what I'm gathering here from this computer screen, is that the Skrulls might even have their hands on DNA or these.
I see what you did there. Have their hands on DNA.
That involve Groot, this Frost Beast, and Cole Obsidian. Now, there is another computer shot in here, Kevin, too, that is very important, and it has links to one of your favorite MCU movies, because it is Extremis. And when we first saw Extremis in Iron Man 3 as the invention of the movie's true villain, Aldrich Killian and his organization AIM designed Extremis as a way to harness full human potential, most immediately. Killian sold AIM as a way for wounded vets to regrow missing limbs. But Killian hit an important byproduct of Extremis, the way it turned people into human bombs. Killian's plans for Extremis were necessitated to a cover to blame it on, and thus borrowed the identity of Menwu, father of Shang-Chi, to invest in a terrorist called the Mandarin. So Extremis, there was another computer screen with a person who, it looks like the person had deceased, but it was one of the surviving people of that hit squad that they sent after Tony and one of Killick's Extremis people. So the Skrulls are you have Frost Beast, you have Cole Obsidian, you've got Extremis, and you've got Groot, which, when you add in certain abilities of each of these things, leads into the Super Skrull. Now, in the MCU, this is where we're going to start having a little bit of ties to the comics here, Kevin. In the MCU, the Super Skrull is a villain who has been altered with his shape-shifting abilities and his DNA to have all the powers of the Fantastic Four. So he's able to turn his body rock hard like the Thing. He can stretch like Mr. Fantastic. He can turn himself invisible, and he has the powers of the Human Torch. He's been a long time standing villain and sometimes anti-villain within the Marvel comics. These four things put together, because the Frost Beast had kind of a camouflage thing going on as well too. You put these four things together, They are the MCU current version of those powers of the Fantastic Four. Cull Obsidian kind of representing the Thing, Groot representing Mr. Fantastic, the Frost Beast kind of probably representing the Invisible Woman, and obviously Extremis representing the powers of the Human Torch.
Remind me, Kyle, because
Mhm.
someone that I love dearly recently reminded me that the Super Skrull was part of was it a Marvel Capcom game or something like
Yes.
that? What was
Mhm.
that? What was that again?
I believe it was Marvel versus Street Fighter.
Yes, yes. And this person that I speak of is my wife, Erin, because she nicknamed me Super Skrull. You want to know why?
We are family friendly, Kevin.
Uh, it's not what you think, because every morning while I was in Australia, when I would go with her to her cycle classes, because she's a fitness instructor, I'd be on my phone scrolling through my phone. She'd go, "Put the phone down, you Super Scroll." So that was her nickname. So was that a fun game? She apparently remembered it enough that it was a fun game, and she had played it before.
Yeah, it was a very popular. All those Capcom Street Fighter games were incredibly popular in the arcades, and I know Marvel versus Capcom was a very popular one as well. But what's interesting about this, Kevin, is because if you go back and watch some of the early trailers for Secret Invasion, there's a point where we see a couple of the scrolls with like extending their limbs out.
So the bigger thing that we're going to be getting into, and the bigger threat, is that the scrolls, because they can transform themselves into anyone, it doesn't mean that they gain the powers if they happen to be a superhero. So they are looking to strengthen themselves in addition to keeping their powers of being able to become anyone. If they want to become a Captain America type person and take over their identity, they also need to be able to find out a way to take over their powerful skills. Is this correct, Kyle?
Correct. By altering their DNA with these DNA samples, they're
Right.
able to do so. And if you remember, there was a line in this week's episode where they go, "Well, what about the Avengers?" And Talos goes, "I have a solution. Don't worry about the Avengers. I have a solution for that."
Hmm.
Hence your Super Skull, which I think is going to become a very key part going forward. And I think we will see a version of the Super Skrull before Secret Invasion is over with.
Is the Super Skrull bad or good?
Well, he initially was brought in as a villain, but there have been times when there's been bigger cosmic threats that he's joined the side of the heroes because it's in his own best interest. But for the most part, you would probably consider the Super Skrull a villain at this point.
Gotcha.
So I'm very, very fascinated to see what they do with this. If we actually get a true Super Skrull that has all four of these powers, or if we're just going to see different scrolls with each one having a different version.
It's
One of these
interesting
powers.
too. The picture that you're showing up here on the YouTube channel, it looks like they're all Fantastic Four powers. You know, he's got like the Thing hand. He's got
Yep.
the was it the flame
The Human
pants, or
Torch.
the Human Torch pants, and stuff. So yeah.
Well, and like I said, what I find even more interesting is you look at the characters they're showing and getting the DNA for. In the MCU, those powers kind of reflect the Fantastic Four powers. You kind of use Groot for the stretching, the way he grows out his limbs. Cull Obsidian representing the Thing. You've got the Extremis representing the Human Torch aspect. So yeah, I find it very smart and very interesting that they're kind of working on the fly since they haven't really introduced the Fantastic Four yet. And they don't want to reveal that power set until they actually do release the Fantastic Four. So
Right.
Kudos to Marvel for doing a fun job there. But Kevin, as we get ready to close out this episode of True Believers, is there any final thoughts or things that you're hoping to see in next week's episode?
I need some new allies here for Nick Fury. It seems to be running thin here, and I like to get a little hope, but it looks like it's just going to get darker. So I don't know. I hope it picks up the pace a little bit. The Super Skrull thing sounds interesting, but obviously it's more on the nefarious side. I need someone to come in and because it's more fun when there's some help involved here. especially with someone like Nick Fury. With Miss Marvel, that was different, you know. But Nick's got to pull in some favors. This is all I'm asking.
I think what you're going to see in the next episode is I think you're going to start seeing some of the pieces come together on the Fury side, Kevin, whether it's people who already exist in the show, if they add somebody who they've kept secret as far as who they might them being in this show. But I think you're going to see Talos and Gaia kind of work through their things, kind of maybe coming to Fury's aid. I think you'll eventually see Sonya Fallsworth back with Fury. And I'm hoping it's by the end of this episode, we also see Fury kind of get himself corrected somewhat here. And we see him being back to more of the Fury that we are accustomed to compared to this kind of down and out, haven't been really dealt with the things that happened to him by being blipped out. And I'm hoping the third episode, like Kristen Howard said in her review, tends to be a big episode for this series. Well, I think it's kind of at the end of it, it might be a darker before it's dawn kind of thing. But I think by the end of this episode, you're going to see that at least spark of things coming together to defeat the Skrull invasion.
I think he needs to start with the trimming of that beard.
Yeah, the beard's got to go. I'm with you 100% there. The beard has got to go.
I do. I just want to say though, I do kind of like him being eye patchless, and you just kind of see, the eye that's kind of widened out a little bit, and the scars. I kind of like that look. It looks cool.
But if we're gonna go bearded, no beard, bald Nick Fury, we got to have the eye patch. The eye patch is intimidating when it comes to Fury's case. But with that, it is time to close out this episode of True Believers. Of course, you can find True Believers on the Fandom Podcast Network, whether it is on our YouTube channel. If you're watching us on the video now, thank you. Please like, subscribe, and share out to all your family and friends. You can also, of course, listen to the podcast version of this on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. And of course, you can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on all your major podcast catchers out there, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or so many more of them. Of course, you can also visit the True Believers Facebook page. We try to keep you updated on all the happenings in the MCU. And speaking of which, I got a flash on my phone during this podcast. It looks like filming on Deadpool 3 is coming to an end soon. And also Captain America Brave New World, not New World Order anymore, Brave New World has wrapped its filming as well. So trying to get those things out before some major things might be happening in Hollywood over the next couple of weeks.
Right.
You can find me, Kyle, on social media on Twitter at AKyleW, or you can find me on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Kevin, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me, of course, on Facebook, and you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix.
And of course, too, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network with our Facebook page. Join there. We keep you updated what's going on with all the podcasts and what's just happening in fandom in general. And you can also follow that on Twitter at FanPod Network. It's been great, Kevin, talking Skrulls with you again. Hopefully we have a little bit more reveals. If you come back next week looking a little green, I'm going to be concerned, though. But with that, I want to thank everybody for listening. And until next time, as always, Excelsior and make ours Marvel.